It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
There is a detail almost never spoken aloud. Traditions never survive intact. We recognize their contours, of course, the familiar gestures, the ancient symbols, the formulas we recite by memory. Yet beneath that surface, smoothed by centuries of handling, something has already turned upside down. It seems like preservation, but it is masked transformation. What feels like continuity is, in truth, a parody of its own origin. The original has become its own shadow, wearing the original's face. Take Carnival. Born as the temporary overturning of order, as suspension of hierarchies, today it is a procession of tamed masks, a tourist spectacle, an economy of confetti. The reversal of the reversal. A tradition that still lives, yes, but breathing backwards. What once shattered social order now confirms it, renders it harmless. The ferocious laughter that once burned the pride of authorities now belongs to the sterile, calculated choreography of corporate sponsors. You don't need to travel far. Look at a religious procession, maybe in a town you know well. They'll tell you it is the same as centuries ago, yet its steps beat to a different rhythm. In the distant past, this very procession gazed at the sky and desperately implored the heavens for rain. It was a matter of sheer survival, a cosmic trembling in the face of nature's terrible indifference. Now, under a bright, unthreatening sky, it merely celebrates local folklore. What was once a desperate existential plea is today nothing more than a colorful, scheduled entry on the municipal calendar. Not that it is less true, it is simply inverted. Collective memory is an optical filter, capable of flipping meaning while leaving outlines untouched. This is the heart of the semiotics of inverted traditions. The sign does not extinguish, it warps under the terrible weight of passing epochs. The philosopher Roland Barthes would famously argue that modern myth does not entirely erase meaning. Rather, it meticulously hollows out the old meaning, emptying the shell, only to fill it with something entirely else. However, the game here takes on a much more bizarre character. It is not mere appropriation, but a complete reversal. A semantic alchemy where ash becomes gold, and gold, eventually, turns to plastic. Have you ever wondered why superstitious gestures, originally conjured to ward off the darkness, endure today as cultural memes? The sign loses its raw power, yet it refuses to vanish, surviving instead by laughing at itself. Consider the umbrella opened indoors, once a harbinger of doom, or the black cat darting across the road. These are the apparent remnants of archaic beliefs, no longer feared, but invoked with a knowing irony. Yet, in that very irony, the magic secretly functions, for irony ensures survival. By denying the belief, it affirms the gesture. What was feared becomes a joke. What was sacred becomes folkloric. What was once a rebellion becomes part of the conformist protocol. Tradition, to survive, disguises itself, and in that disguise, it inverts its own sense. But don't think this is random. Every inversion follows a precise dynamic. Social memory works like a convex lens. It does not conserve, it refracts. It does not archive, it reshapes. What seems like fidelity to the original is only a deformed echo, recognizable in pitch, distorted in meaning. The melody is there, the words have changed. Consider a more radical example, the Sabbath. For ecclesiastical powers, it was a diabolical ceremony, a negation of divine order. Yet often it was nothing more than peasant ritual tied to agricultural cycles. It was power that inverted its meaning, codifying it as abomination. Here, the reversal does not emerge from the community, it is imposed from outside. The flipping of sense is a political act. That is the crucial point. Inversion is never neutral. Behind it, there is always a will. Appropriation, control, reinvention. Is that not precisely what happens today with certain digital rituals? Think of the screenshot. Once a neutral technical gesture, it has become a social ceremony. Proof, memory, subtle threat. The gesture survives, but its meaning has been reversed. You might say, then every ritual is destined to betray itself. And that is true. Yet in that betrayal lies its force. What repeats itself identically dies. Only what bends, what inverts, what allows itself to be betrayed can survive. A paradox, yes, but cultural history is nothing more than a chain of camouflaged paradoxes. And do not believe that inversion is always impoverishment. Sometimes it is revelation. The overturned object reveals a side never seen before. The harvest feast becomes a national holiday. The mourning gesture becomes a protest. The candle lit no longer for the dead, but for the victims of war. Each time, meaning shifts, changes direction, mirrors itself in the opposite. You may feel disoriented, as if lost in a labyrinth without exit. But let me offer this. The labyrinth is tradition itself. It is not about finding a way out. It is about listening to the walls. Every inversion leaves a trace, like a scratch engraved on the skin of time. Follow it, and you will not find the origin, but a reflection. Perhaps that is enough. Some have seen in this mechanism the mark of hidden orchestration. Esoteric thinkers like Guénon or Evola spoke of a primordial tradition corrupted by modern inversions. But perhaps it is not corruption. Perhaps it is physiology. The primordial tradition, if it ever existed, was already predisposed to overturn itself. Every sign contains within itself the seed of its own opposite. That is the logic of the symbol, to say one thing in order to evoke another. And you, the listener, are no exception. Even your daily gesture, repeated without thought, already contains its reversal. Shaking hands, a gesture of peace, born to show no weapon was held. Today, often, an empty formality. Its origin is distant, almost invisible, buried under layers of boardrooms and job interviews and diplomatic summits. Yet the sign remains. You use the sign unknowingly, continually inverting it each time you offer your hand without intent. So nothing remains but to accept the game, to observe rituals not for what they were or are, but for the tension running through them, that invisible force which makes them overturn, parody themselves, survive in the opposite of themselves. Semiotics of inverted traditions, then, the art of reading the reverse. The goal is not to unmask or denounce, but to peacefully dwell within the very heart of that paradox. Because, after all, meaning is never straight. It is always oblique, and you can sense it. What we call tradition is nothing but a palimpsest, endlessly rewritten, a fabric tearing and stitching itself back together, leaving behind only echoes and simulacra. See you in the next episode.